I buried my wife 6 months ago. I stood by the sea and let what was left of our shared life fall into the cold water. So when my phone vibrated in my jacket pocket right in the middle of my son's wedding, I was ready to turn it off. Then I heard that voice, low, trembling, and so familiar it stopped my heart. "It's me." I did not turn around. I did not shout. I just stood there, knowing a truth had been opened, and everything I had believed for so long was beginning to crack. If you are listening to this story, please subscribe to the channel so you do not miss what comes next. And leave me a comment. Tell me where you are listening from, at home, on the road, or in a quiet moment just for yourself. As for me, while the music in the hall kept playing steady and bright, I took a long breath and stepped into a night I was never prepared to face. I was still standing there, my hand wrapped around the microphone, cold to the touch. The ceiling lights spilled down over rows of tables covered in white cloth. People thought I was emotional. They did not know that inside my head old memories were colliding, making the dry sound of a structure about to collapse. I looked at my son. Logan stood straight, his tailored suit crisp his face, wearing the familiar confidence of a young lawyer who believed everything was under control. Beside him, Harper rested her hand on his arm. Her smile was soft. Perfect. So perfect, there was no room left for doubt. They looked exactly like the kind of couple people bless with easy words, beautiful, successful, and having been through enough loss to deserve this happiness. Only I knew that a moment ago something had called from my pocket. Something that did not belong to the present. I set the microphone down before anyone noticed. The silence stretched one beat too long. I placed a hand on my chest and slowed my breathing, playing a role I never thought I would perform in my life. An old man whose heart suddenly felt unsteady. There were a few murmurs. A chair scraped back. Someone called my name. I nodded. I signaled that I needed some air. No one questioned it. At my age, fatigue is always a reasonable explanation. I walked into the stone hallway leading to the garden behind the estate. The Cape Cod morning fog had not fully lifted. It clung to the tall windows, turning everything inside into a blurred painting hung in the wrong light. I opened my phone. The call had ended, but there was a new message, no words, just a red location dot, 10 miles. I stood still for a few more seconds. 6 months ago came rushing back with painful clarity. The vacation house burned to the ground. The smell of smoke stayed in my clothes for weeks. A body so badly damaged it had no face, identified by cold paperwork and brief explanations. And I, a husband who had lived with his wife for more than 40 years, accepted it. Because sometimes people believe the first pain they are given, just so they can keep breathing. I believed that door was closed. I returned to the reception hall and spoke briefly with the event manager. I asked them to keep an eye out in case I needed to leave early. I did not look at Logan. I did not look at Harper. I did not want to read anything on their faces as I passed. I took my coat, my car keys, and walked out to the rear parking lot. As I drove, rain began to fall. Not heavy, just steady and persistent. The drops tapped against the windshield in a slow rhythm, almost soothing. I turned on the navigation, followed the familiar coastal road, then turned onto a narrow side street with little traffic. With every mile I felt as if I were moving backward in time, returning to a place I thought I had left behind. I asked myself what I was expecting. A cruel joke, a vicious mistake, or someone who knew too much about my pain and decided to press on it. I did not allow myself to name hope. At this age, hope is the thing that breaks you the fastest. The warehouse appeared after a sharp bend, an old, structured, dull metal roof sitting apart from the carefully kept vacation homes nearby. I shut off the engine and stayed seated for a moment, listening to the rain on the roof. The silence here was different from the silence in the hall. It was not decorated. It did not hide anything. I opened the warehouse door. The smell of dampness and old metal rushed out. A weak overhead bulb cast light into a dark corner inside. I slowed my steps, one at a time, as if moving faster might cause everything in front of me to disappear. And then I saw her, not the image I had carried for 6 months. Not ashes, not documents, a real person. Sitting against the cold wall, thinner than I remembered, gray hair tangled, but those eyes, the eyes I had looked into for half my life, were still there. No names needed, no explanations. My world did not collapse in that moment. It simply changed shape. I understood then that the wedding behind me was no longer just a ceremony. It was a stage, And I, whether I wanted it or not, had just been pulled into a story where the cost of truth would be higher than any number ever spoken aloud. I closed the warehouse door, leaving the rain outside to keep falling. In that moment, I knew I could not turn back, not because of anger, but because some doors once opened will never allow us to pretend they never existed. I did not step forward right away. I stayed a few paces back, far enough that if this was only a late illusion of old age, it would have time to fade on its own. Then Heather lifted her head. She did not say my name. She only looked at me as if afraid that a single sound would cause everything to shut closed again. "It's me," I said. My voice sounded unfamiliar in the closed space. "I'm here." She let out a breath, slow and deep. No tears, just a heavy-held exhaustion, like someone who had stayed underwater for too long. I took one step closer. The light revealed details I had not seen at first. Old rope marks pressed into her wrists, clothes that did not fit her anymore, skin pale from lack of sunlight. I stopped again. I did not touch her yet. I was afraid that one touch might break the fragile order holding us upright. "Don't ask," she said. "Listen first." We sat down on the warehouse floor. Outside, the rain kept a steady rhythm, like a clock, reminding me that time was still moving even though inside my head everything had stopped. Heather spoke slowly, piece by piece. She did not try to convince me. She did not ask for forgiveness. She simply placed the truth between us, like setting down something heavy that required two people to face it together. 6 months ago, the evening at the vacation house was ordinary until Logan arrived earlier than expected. He brought a bottle of wine, said he wanted to celebrate a new deal. Heather took a small sip. After that, everything blurred. There was no fall, no loud noise, just the feeling of being pulled out of her own room. When she woke up, she was here. She did not know how long it had been. She did not know day from night. She only knew that someone came by, left food, checked the locks, and left again. I did not interrupt. I did not ask why. I had heard enough to understand that those questions would only make things heavier, not clearer. "And the fire?" I asked when she paused. Heather shook her head slightly. "A performance," she said. "They prepared it. There were documents. There were people who confirmed everything. It all happened so fast. I didn't even understand how I was removed from my own life. She did not need to explain who they were. I had seen Harper's smile on that stage. I had watched the way her family shook hands, exchanged looks, like people used to working behind the curtain. Heather said Harper did not come from the wealthy background they claimed. It was a polished name, a clean shell smooth enough to hide the tangled financial lines underneath. Their target was not Logan. He was only the shortest path. Logan was in debt, not from lack of income, but from a life built on parties and promises. When Heather's trust fund was mentioned, a condition that opened only if she was no longer present, everything began to slide out of place. Heather said. Logan agreed to cross the first line. Then, convinced himself he would stop before it went too far. He did not stop. Why didn't they end it? I asked, choosing my words carefully. Money, Heather said, and fear. They needed me here as a backup card. If things didn't go smoothly, they would use me to bargain, even with their own family. I sat in silence. I thought about the calls. Logan never returned. The way he avoided my eyes. The answers that were too neat. I had called it work pressure. I had allowed myself the most convenient explanation. And the call today, I asked. Heather said someone in their group made a mistake. An old phone that was not checked carefully. A small crack in a plan that seemed airtight. She had waited for this moment for months. Not to escape, but for me to know. If you know, she said, everything changes. I stood up. I did not say what I was going to do. I only opened the warehouse door, drew in the cold, damp air, then turned back to her. We're getting out of here, I said, but not the way they expect. I called an old friend, a teammate from the years I worked at sea. No long explanations. Just an address and a simple request. A quiet place. Private. Safe enough for someone to disappear for a few days. When his car pulled up outside the warehouse, I helped Heather stand. She leaned on me, light, as if she had forgotten the weight of her own body. On the road, I glanced at the clock. The reception was still going on. Music, laughter, congratulations. All of it unfolding just a few miles away, in a world I had already stepped out of. I did not feel anger. Not yet. Only a cold clarity. The pieces had found their places. Once Heather was safe, I turned the car around. The rain had softened. The fog still clung to the road, but I no longer felt lost. I knew where I was going back to, and why. That wedding was no longer a family ceremony. It was where all the lines crossed, and I understood that if I did not return, the story would be finished without me. I adjusted my coat, turned off the navigation, and drove toward the distant lights of the estate. In my mind, there was no elaborate plan, only one simple decision. The truth would not be locked inside a warehouse, ever again. When I returned to the estate, the reception had shifted into a different rhythm, louder, more confident, as if everything that mattered had already been decided. Music filled the main hall. More wine was poured. The congratulations now carried the sound of relief. I walked in without drawing attention. At my age, presence is often treated like background. I stood near a window where the light did not fall directly. From there, I watched, not to look for mistakes, but to notice the gaps between gestures and words. Harper's family clustered in small groups. They did not blend into the crowd. They managed it. Short nods, brief touches, just long enough to pass something along. Then they separated again. I had worked with offshore operations teams. I recognized that rhythm, the rhythm of people used to assigned roles. Logan appeared near the bar. He smiled, talked with a few colleagues. But his eyes were not there. Each time Harper turned away, his gaze slid toward the hallway, quick, uneasy, like checking a door he was not sure was locked. I did not step in. I let that worry grow on its own. I called the sound manager and asked for a small favor. To double-check the playlist for the final part of the night. I spoke slowly and clearly, like a father who only wanted things to run smoothly. He nodded. He did not ask questions. Small requests rarely raise suspicion. I kept watching. Harper's father, a neatly dressed man, was speaking with a real estate broker. I caught fragments. Boston, transfer. After the honeymoon, Harper's mother stood beside him, smiling softly, as if this plan had already been approved long ago. They spoke about my assets in the tone of people who had already signed the papers in their minds. A familiar chill settled in me. Not anger, clarity sharp enough to hurt. I moved closer to Logan while Harper was busy greeting guests. "You doing okay?" I asked. My voice was so normal it surprised even me. He startled. In that brief moment, I saw something I had missed for months, fear without a name. "Yeah," he said. "It's just a lot." "I understand," I said. "Some things, if we don't speak them, will find a way to speak for us." He looked at me, weighing something. Then Harper returned. The conversation closed. Clean. Like a drawer. I stepped out onto the back terrace. The ocean wind carried the smell of salt. I called my old friend again and added one more request. Have a few familiar people ready, stationed near the exits if needed. Do nothing. Just stand there. Sometimes presence alone is enough to change the direction of a night. When I went back inside, Harper was laughing. She touched Logan's hand, light but controlling. I saw the way Logan stiffened for a second, then relaxed into her rhythm. A bond that did not need a rope. I walked up to Harper. "The ceremony was beautiful," I said. "Your family prepared it well." "We value details," she replied. "Especially the ones that decide things." "Yes," I said. "The deciding details." Her gaze lingered a beat longer than necessary. Then she smiled. A smile that did not reach her eyes. The music shifted to a slow song. People moved toward the floor. I stayed where I was. I let the rhythm do its work, pulling everyone together. I signaled the sound manager. He nodded. A few minutes left. Logan came to me again. This time without Harper. "Dad," he said quietly, "I need to talk." "Tonight isn't the time," I said. "But you will have time." "You don't understand." "I understand enough," I said, without raising my voice. "And enough to know that if you stay silent, others will speak for you." He stepped back, as if the floor had tilted. I saw Harper turn, searching for him. Her eyes met mine, then shifted away. A decision was made somewhere. Fast, cold. Someone from Harper's family moved toward a side exit. I saw my old friend standing there quiet. The man stopped, changed direction. The exits began to have people near them. Not blocking, just standing. The music faded. The manager stepped onto the stage and announced a final commemorative video. Scattered applause. Harper gripped Logan's hand tighter. I stepped forward unhurried. I did not look at them. I looked at the crowd. "Thank you all for being here," I said. "There are stories that need to be told when everyone is still in the same room." No one laughed. No one spoke. Silence spread like water. The screen lit up. Before the image appeared, I heard Harper inhale. A very small sound, but enough. I stood there, feeling my heartbeat slow and steady. I was no longer being pulled by the event. I was guiding it. And I knew that whatever was about to be exposed, no matter how many things it shattered this night, would end differently than the way they had planned. The screen came on slowly, as if it needed time to decide what it was about to say. In the first moment, there was no sound. Just a still frame, an old metal wall, a weak overhead light, a chair set slightly off to the side. I heard a few quiet coughs in the crowd. Someone let out an awkward laugh, assuming this was just an unpolished opening. Then the voice came through. Not loud, not shaking. Heather's voice. She was not looking directly at the camera. Her gaze was slightly off, as if she were speaking to someone standing just beside it. "If you're watching this," she said, "then it means I'm no longer where I was being kept." She paused for a beat. "And it also means there are people in this room who need to hear this." I did not turn to look at Logan. I did not need to. I felt the shift in the air, a collective tightening, as the congratulations from moments ago suddenly lost their place. Heather spoke simply. No extra detail. She talked about a carefully arranged plan, about signatures, appointments, promises traded like goods. She did not use harsh words. She only laid the truth down piece by piece, steady and calm. When the screen cut to another angle of the warehouse, I heard a whisper behind me. Harper turned around. Her smile was gone. She scanned the room as if searching for an exit that was no longer there. Her family began to stir, quick touches, urgent headshakes. No one ran. Not yet. They still believed things could be explained differently. Then the hall doors opened. Heather walked in, unhurried. She wore a simple coat. Her hair was neatly tied back. The lights fell on a face so familiar that a few people gasped, as if a photograph had stepped out of its frame. I heard someone say her name, cut short as silence spread. Logan turned around. I saw his shoulders drop, not from regret, but from realizing there was no space left to hide. Harper stepped back, then another step. She said something to her parents. I did not catch the words. I did not need to. "I'm sorry," Logan said very softly. Not directed at anyone in particular. The apology fell to the floor, unable to find a place to stand. I stepped forward. Just one step. Before anyone continues, I said, "I need to make one thing clear." I took a sheet of paper from my jacket pocket, not to display it, only to place a period at the end of a sentence that had gone on too long. 1 hour before the ceremony, I revised my arrangements, I said. If I am no longer able to make decisions, everything transfers into a public trust. No one here, including me, can use it as leverage. There was a pause. Then questions began forming on a few faces. Harper's family stood still, as if the weight of the room had been taken away. All the talk of Boston, of transfers, of after the honeymoon. It all went hollow. Heather stepped forward one more pace. "I didn't come here to take anything back," she said. "I came to close this." She looked at Logan, not with anger. "You chose silence for too long." Logan dropped to his knees, not as a dramatic gesture, just a collapse when his legs could no longer hold the role. Harper turned away. She said this was staged, that the video could have been edited, that there were misunderstandings to be explained privately. No one responded. Those words no longer had a place to land. I gave a signal. The people at the exits remained where they were, not blocking, just present. That presence alone was enough to slow every step. A distant siren echoed outside. No one looked surprised. The night had passed the point of return. I did not look toward the doors. I looked at Heather. She gave a very slight nod, like a final agreement. As things began to be sorted, questions noted, explanations requested, I stepped back. I did not need to stand at the center anymore. The story was standing on its own. Later, as the room slowly thinned out, I stepped onto the terrace. The ocean wind moved through again, salty and cold. Heather stood beside me. We did not speak. We did not need to. Some nights, justice does not arrive with applause. It arrives with silence placed exactly where it belongs. I looked back at the hall one last time. The lights were still on, but they no longer shone as brightly. I knew that by morning everything would be named differently. But tonight at least the truth had not been kept behind any door. The night did not end with an exclamation point. It ended with quiet procedures. When Heather and I left the estate, the fog had thinned, revealing a long, empty coastal road. No one followed us. No one called our names. The story had found its own direction. It no longer needed explanation. The days that followed moved more slowly than I expected. There were rooms to reopen, accounts to place on hold, phone calls carried out in neutral tones. I did not take part in everything. I let rules do their work. At this age, I have learned that silence used at the right moment carries more weight than any argument. Logan did not come to see me right away. When he did, we met in a small room without windows. He spoke more than I expected, but less than I needed. I listened. I did not argue. When he stopped, I said only one thing. I taught you how to build strong bridges. You chose to burn the ground you were standing on. He lowered his head. No defense fit anymore. I left before any further words became unnecessary. Heather and I moved closer to the sea. Not for romance, just because things are clearer there. Mornings come with wind. Afternoons come with slanted light. We walk slowly, like two people learning the rhythm of life again from the beginning. There are long silences. They do not pull us apart. Instead, they return something we had lost, the ability to be beside each other without explanation. Our assets are no longer what they once were. The numbers that once drew attention are now frozen or redirected toward purposes I chose long ago but never spoke about. I do not regret it. Money did its job. It revealed what needed to be revealed. After that, it should leave the stage. One afternoon, Heather asked if I regretted going back to the wedding that night. I thought for a moment. If I hadn't gone back, I said, the truth would still exist. It just would have been told by someone else. She nodded. We sat watching the waves roll in. No climax, no surprise. Just the continuation that was needed. From time to time, I received short messages. A greeting, a late apology, or just a single dot. I do not reply to all of them, not out of resentment, but because some relationships once stretched too far do not return to their original shape. That is not failure. It is a fact. One morning we stood by the water again, the place where I once believed I had said my final goodbye. Heather held my hand, still thin, but warm. No one brought up the past. We just stood there and let the wind pass through us. I understood then that some losses are not returned whole. But other things, dignity, truth, the ability to choose rightly, can remain intact. If there is a lesson worth saying aloud, it is this. A greedy heart is always starving. It does not know when to stop, so it is never full. Justice, when it arrives the right way, does not need noise. It comes by closing the wrong doors and opening paths wide enough for people to move forward. I do not tell this story to seek sympathy. I tell it because I lived through it, and because I believe some weddings are not meant to be celebrated, but to remind us that a beautiful ceremony can hide many things, but not forever. And that in the end, what keeps us standing is not what we own, but what we are willing to protect when everything else begins to crack. When the sun sets, Heather and I return home. The lights come on. The door closes. Nothing is locked except what truly needs to be closed. And this time, silence is no longer a hiding place. It is a calm space, enough for us to begin again slowly, honestly, and whole in our own way. Thank you for staying with this story. If it made you think, or simply made you pause for a moment, please tap like to support the channel, subscribe, and turn on notifications if you want to continue listening to quiet, thoughtful, and honest family stories like this one. And if you believe someone needs to hear today's story, don't hesitate to share it. Thank you for listening.